All righty, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for today's show. It is slightly different studio, as you could probably tell. And let me just see if I can fix this graphic a little bit. Come over, there we go. And it's all fixed. So thank you all for being here. My name is Anthony Barocas here for Bird Dog Live. And as always, with every show, you have the opportunity to win a copy of BirdDog Connect. So you can use this entry form right here at the bottom, bit.ly/BD for BirdDog entry. That will take you to a form. Or you can use your phone and scan this QR code right here, and that will take you to the same form. And fill out the form, your name, your email address, and some other information that we'd love to get from you. And that way, anyone around the world can win a subscription, a 1-year subscription to BirdDog Cloud. And if you don't know what BirdDog Cloud really offers, well, not that you have a lot of time, but if you don't know what BirdDog Connect really offers, go to last week's show where Dan himself did a really good overview, not even super in depth, but a really good overview talking about all the different ways you can get content in, what you can do with it when it's in the cloud, and what you can do. There's even a live vision mixer in BirdDog Connect, so you can do shows, you can produce shows like this in the cloud in BirdDog Connect. So there's a lot of technology in this, and it is a free 1-year prize for anyone who enters this contest. So, but you got to be here live during the show. If you're here after the show actually airs live, the entry form will be closed and you won't be able to enter because we're actually going to do the drawing at the end of this very show. So thank you all for being here live. As always, I love to, I say thank you everyone for being here live, but also I'd love to know where everyone is watching from because you're here live, we are here live, and this is a worldwide show. So we've got people from Europe through Americas. Last year we had Australia, New Zealand, and I think Vietnam watching the show. So that was really, really cool having this really a worldwide audience watching this show because we're live and because of the internet, we can do this. And let's see, we got a couple comments coming in. And Angus says, watching from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada today. So thank you very much for chiming in from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And for all those who haven't yet chimed in, because I can see the viewer count go up. I got it right here in front of my screen. If you haven't already chimed in, feel free to tell me where you are watching from today, because we always love to know where people are watching from. And again, I'm just leaving this up for a long time so that people can enter. Oh, and I see entries on the screen already. So people are indeed watching. If you are watching this and you happen to hear thunder, you are actually hearing thunder. There's a thunderstorm going through my area at the moment. So if you do hear thunder, or if my camera suddenly vanishes, that means the power has gone out and my internet connection no longer exists. And people would say, why don't you just use a UPS? Because a good live streaming producer, that's what they would have, a UPS. Well, I did that. And the last time the power went out, yeah, my setup was still working, but the internet connection somewhere down the line was not working. So my internet connection was dead, regardless of whether I had a UPS or not. So there's only so much one can do in the broadcast world. So without further ado, let me take this graphic away. And it's always trying to figure out which tab it's in. Here we go. And I'm in a different studio than before. So in the news today, oh, wrong side, that's fine. In the news today, X4. There's a big update for the X4. So if you have an X4, awesome camera, great job. If you have an X4, please check out download the new firmware with key improvements, NDI and Visa control for the keyboard, full API integration, including companion support. And we know people love companion. It's a great tool. If you haven't already, looked into companion, please feel free to go check that out, because that lets you take your Elgato Stream Deck and control all kinds of things. And it makes programming super easy. So full companion support now for the X4. Improved network stability for Wi-Fi and Ethernet, as long as they're on the same subnet. So because you can connect via Wi-Fi and via Ethernet, it's going to find two different Ethernet connections. So just improved network stability if you're already doing that. New AI tracking with headroom adjustment. So for those who are using the AI tracking, you can adjust how high. Like I like to have my head a little higher in the frame. You can adjust that. That's really cool. And autofocus optimization for low light conditions, because the camera, every camera is going to have to struggle a little bit to find those eyes and everything in low light conditions. So that's been optimized. So check that out as well if you have the X4. As always, BirdDog is doing continuous improvements with regards to the hardware and the software that talks to that hardware and the firmware updates. So always come back to these live shows, go to the website, and there's a whole download section. Check on your camera and make sure that you have the latest update for your camera so that you're getting the latest features and getting rid of whatever bugs might still be around. Next up, I want to introduce Christian. He's going to be my guest from NDI, from BirdDog, so that we can talk about all the different encoders. So encoders, assemble. Let me bring Christian on right now so that I don't have to do all this by myself.
Hey, Anthony.
And as I said in the beginning of the show, remember everyone, if you have any questions anytime during the show, ooh, accidentally covering you up there, I apologize. Here, let me put you up here. It's okay to cover me up. Anyone has any questions about the devices we're going to be talking about in today's show, throw them in the comments the moment you have the question. We have one question that came in before the show. We've put that into the show, into the comments over here. But if you have a question at any time with regards to the BirdDog encoders, throw it right into the comments. That's the advantage of being here for the live show. You get to ask questions while we're doing the show. So without further ado, let us get right into this. The first encoders are the 4K, the HDMI encoders. So tell us about these encoders.
Yeah, the 4K Pro family, we'll go through each of them individually because there's, 4 different models of it that we have,
right,
with a combination of different ports. So the 4K Pro HDMI is really cool because you have a total of 3 different outputs on it. You have 2 HDMI ports and there's an SDI port on it. And there's a handful of different, configurations that we can do using those different ports, whether it's dual encode or single encode. So whether you want to encode via HDMI or why am I always forgetting? But you can also encode via SDI as well. So if you want to just do a single mode on it and encode via just HDMI, you can do that. Or we have a dual encode mode where you can encode via HDMI and the SDI port on it.
So and then for people who don't know, there's the HDMI models, and then there's also the SDI models as well.
We'll tick into that too, yeah. And the SDI is the same way, actually. Where I'm just pulling up my my reference because there's so many ports. So on the 4K SDI, if you want to do like dual encode, for instance, because the 4K SDI is just the opposite of the HDMI, where you have 2 SDI ports and 1 HDMI on it. So if you want to run dual encode mode on the 4K SDI, it's actually utilizing both SDI ports and not the HDMI for encoding. So if you want to encode with HDMI generally at all, the 4K HDMI is going to be the way, where the 4K SDI is going to double your capacity with the SDI in particular.
Yeah, and then also on each of these models, because there's both HDMI and SDI, there's the ability to loop through. So you can come in SDI, and I believe you can then assign one of those SDIs that you're converting to send it back out the HDMI to use locally for, let's just say you needed to feed a video projector or something like that from a camera. So you could actually send that on both via NDI and also HDMI as well.
Yeah, so if you're in like the single encode mode on the HDMI, for instance, you can do the encode with the HDMI, and then you can actually loop out with the HDMI, the second HDMI, and or the SDI port. And then with the 4K SDI, you have the option to loop out with the second SDI port and or the HDMI port. So yeah, you do get that loop out via either HDMI or SDI, but that's just going to pare you down to one encode stream.
All right. And of course, a question pops in as we start talking about encoding. Yeah. When will we see SRT announced for Silicon 2? And I should mention that these devices originally were, before we even get to the question, these devices were full NDI. When they shipped, they were full NDI. And it's only, I believe, with the Silicon 2 update that they got the NDI HX support in addition, because it says full NDI and NDI HX support. So that is a new update long after these things have been out in the wild, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're still looking at bringing the SRT support. We're still looking at it, still scoped, but I don't have a timeline for the development of that. So like right now, like in the queue, the next thing that we're going to be bringing to this family is looking at bringing HX support to the quad, which we haven't gotten to, and then its cousin, the OG4 card. So
don't
the next things in the lineup will be getting.
Don't mention the quad yet. We're not on that slide.
Sorry.
You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead. All right, wait. Here, let me go. There we go.
I like to think of the quad as the big brother of the SDI that we were thinking of, because you have 4 SDI ports that you can either do as 4 encodes, 4 decodes, or you can do simultaneous encode decode, where you can have 2 encode and 2 decode.
I think that's amazing to have this thing be flexible like that. I've got this one box, and then on one show I need to bring 4 in. On another show I need 4 outs. On another show I need two more in and 2 more out. And it's all of that. It's all those things.
Absolutely. It gives you so much flexibility that you're able to bring in. And just calling back to the last comment and the SRT with the Silicon 2, because I know we're going to get the question at some point, like when is the quad going to be able to do HX? And the answer is a lot sooner than you think. We're actively working on it. We'll probably see a beta for our user group for just HX support before we introduce HX and high bandwidth NDI to the devices. So we'll have a beta firmware of that before too long. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly, and we can keep you updated on that as we have more exact info to be able to share. But right now, like, we've essentially in the last year doubled the flexibility of the quad and kind of followed through on some things that we originally committed to with the quad with the simultaneous encode and decode, because it didn't always do that. And it was something that we were able to bring to it with a firmware update. And beyond just even the flexibility of whether you want 4 encode or if you want 2 encode and 2 decode, it's the flexibility with your network connection as well. So whether you want to have a traditional 1 gig PoE connection, or on all of these 4K Pro converters, we have 10 gig SFP plus connectivity as well. So if you're working with 4 4K high bandwidth NDI feeds, and you really want to make sure that you have the bandwidth there. If you have 10 gig SFP networking, end to end, you can set the quad or any of these 4K Pro devices to SFP and be able to just increase your ceiling of bandwidth that's available for you.
Now, I should point out that this is a quad and it says it's part of the 4K family, but it's also HD. This can be a
Yeah.
4 HD thing. And then the built-in Ethernet port can be used as is. You don't have, you will absolutely need, if you're doing 4K 60 streams, the Ethernet port is not really going to be the right connection for this, because
Yeah.
you're going to have more bandwidth and it's going to fit down a gigabit port. But if you're doing HD, and this came up when we were talking about, when we were talking about this on the other end, because we're circling back around, capture, process, and decode. We're doing this whole arc through the system. When we were talking about this, people were asking, well, can we, because it has that HDMI port, but it's sort of been orphaned at this point, to make sure we can get all of the SDI working as advertised with 4K P60. But then somebody says, if I'm just dealing with HD for live streams, which a lot of people are, can we then look at, and Dan was like, that's something they can look at in the future if it's not being asked to do 4 streams of 60p at 4K. There's a lot more, capability inside the unit. Obviously, if it can do 4 streams at 4K.
Yeah, and it comes down, to just where does that fit into the schedule and everything. So the HDMI port on it's not, forgotten by any means. It's something that we're still there. It's just there's a few feature sets that we want to bring and have had a little bit of higher demand for ahead of it. Like I mentioned earlier, be it the NDI-HX support, to be able to match, the feature set of, the rest of the converter line.
Exactly. So HX, getting all 4 inputs and outputs working, 4K 60, that's delivered. Getting the HX support, that is something that a lot of people ask for. So I think that's a really high demand, because HX3 especially has proven itself to be such a flexible codec to deliver the quality and the speed at a much lower data rate. So that really does, HX really does deliver.
It does. And, kind of as almost like a gateway drug to it with the HDMI and the SDI, when you're encoding, you can actually have it encode a high bandwidth and an HX feed at the same time. So when you go to pull, you'll have the ability to choose whether you want the high bandwidth encoded stream or the HX stream of it.
All right, we got a couple questions coming in, and I don't want to let people behind. So let's just see. This one comes in. Can I do box-to-box connections, encoder to decoder, and basically just extend STI? So I got 4 STIs on one side, run a single snake, could be optical. I guess you got to power it somehow.
Yeah.
And then, because the boxes are powered, so that's going to power the SFP port, right? So you got optical to optical. So you're just running fiber between the two, which is very lightweight and thin. And then you've got the 4 SDIs at the other end.
So I think, so if you have one quad and you're encoding 4 SDI, and then you have another quad, on the other end that you want to decode those same 4 out and do an SDI extension, you can totally do that. The converters don't, really care what it's taking the signal from or sending it to. It's more of making sure that it's the right type of, stream. So if you have the box configured to, decode a high bandwidth stream, but you're sending it an NDI-HX stream, that's going to cause some hiccups. But if you have it, set for an NDI-HX while you're sending, an NDI-HX, that's totally fine. It's more about matching the type of signal than it is what device is sending it. We have plenty of folks that are using converter to converter as extensions. I think the one thing to think of is always, as you're introducing more points in any workflow, there's just additional failure points, and that's just something from a design standpoint that's different for each install.
And I think the process would be, because obviously there's no, if you're just doing them device to device, there's no DHCP assigning IP addresses on there. So they both have to be set to manual IP, and they would both have to be configured at some point by a computer so that this device knows to send it to that IP address.
Mhm.
And then once they're set using a switch with manual IP, then they could be set along and run independently, just point to point. They're not going to self-discover. It's like if I just get them in the box and then put them down with a piece of fiber in between them, they're not going to sit there and say, I think he wants me to send 4K to the first input of that other. They're not psychic.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, you got to be able to configure and set those streams.
This one's good. I would love DC out on the flex out to power my field monitor. I think, isn't there a DC out on the flex?
I know it's there. I haven't spent a lot of time with the flexes recently. We recently announced that the flexes have gone end of life, and they're at the end. But if there's something that's not working correctly on the flexes, that's something that definitely our support team can definitely take a look at. And if it's something that we haven't implemented yet, or that's a feature that we're looking at, we have not written the flexes off. We've even recently done an update for them to get them up to NDI 6.
Yep.
But I think our support team is probably the best place to check with that, just to make sure that the flex unit is performing as expected, and to match it with what our expectations are currently.
All right. FK Mobile continues. Can I extend an IP control line to PTZ cameras over the same Cat6 cable? It's a good networking question that I'm not really qualified to answer.
It's rereading it. Can you extend an IP control line to PTZ cameras? I'm not sure I under.
I mean, generally, if we're, it depends on what PTZ camera you're controlling, because if it's like a BirdDog camera, you can just control it over NDI, so you don't need an additional control line to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Or even if you're not controlling it over the same Ethernet with NDI, whether it's Visca over IP, it's the same Ethernet line for control, as long as it's an IP control. So whether that's NDI or Visca IP, the cameras can take those.
All right. This is an interesting one. Was it Wilton? Thank you, Wilton, for this question. When will new decoders be introduced that might support the latest NDI features, such as HDR, high dynamic range?
Wilton, that's a great question. We will announce new converters when new converters are ready.
That is, as Dan has said, I don't know, a dozen times in this show, BirdDog 2.0, we've been told, don't announce until it's ready to ship, until it's actually
HDR is really
off the line.
HDR is really cool, and it's really exciting. The support, with NDI 6 to be able to do HDR support. It's something that we're definitely interested in and absolutely looking at. But I'm not going to put any cart before the horse and, telling you about something before, the time is due.
And I think one of the real challenges is introducing a new decoder. And I'm just, I'm not speaking as someone who has inside knowledge in BirdDog here, but just in general, it's like if you introduce one thing, let's just say Flex version 2, and it is HDR capable, then people are going to assume that, and this will work with all of the other devices. I can go device to device and capture HDR on here and send HDR out the quad, which is not an HDR device at this point.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because like while like NDI6 or what is brings HDR support, that doesn't mean just because a device has the NDI6 library that it is, you know, capable of, handling that HDR completely. So that update just allows the capacity to be able to understand it, but there's additional work that has to be done in the background to be able to, properly handle, that color space.
Right, because the extra color space, the extra depth is extra data. And if an SDI chip was designed to handle this much data, 12G, and then you sit there and say, oh, well, now each pixel has additional 14 bits of depth. And oh, okay, that chip that was built into that unit 5 years ago does not have the ability to handle all of this extra data. So, there's definitely, you can't software engineer your way out of a hardware limitation by the way
Yeah,
something is
and
built.
that's not saying that we have a hardware limitation to it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, I preface it by
yeah,
saying I don't have inside information about how these things are built, and I'm not an engineer.
yeah.
But I'm saying in general, I've seen other solutions in the market. It's like, oh, this is out, so you can do it. It's not always the case. Let's just see. Is the HX3 update a new box or a firmware update?
It's a firmware update for the 4K HDMI and the 4K SDI that is live on our website. And then, when we're done with it for the quad and the OG4 that we haven't gotten to yet, those will also be updates. It's the same product that you've been able to buy for years, that you can still buy now, and it's just a free firmware update that we've brought to the unit. There's
Right.
no change for the license that you need or anything. That's all baked in. It's just um, a pretty simple USB update on the converter.
All right. This is an interesting one. Can we do 10 gigabit over copper, Ethernet port, or SFP adapter?
The RJ45 on these will just handle 1 gig. They won't handle a 10 gig copper. And then in my experience, when I've used a copper module in the SFP, I have not had great luck. But also, that's me doing bad practice of running 10 gig from the 10 gig port to a not 10 gig port on a switch. Um, I'm going to say I don't have an absolute answer on this because I haven't done it. So
And
CJ will probably have a better answer for this. But if you reach out to me directly, I can leave my email at the end,
mhm.
that, or even to our support team, I can get you a better answer, after the show, because it's definitely an answer that I think we have, but I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Right. And in my experience, 10 gigabit is, there's a lot of key factors, like when we first went to like gigabit, it was sort of like you have to make sure you've got a good switch, and you have to
Yeah,
make sure you've got the right cabling. And then you've got to make sure you've got the right SFP adapters, because not all SFP adapters are created equal. Some are like I actually just upgraded my Synology. And it was like, well, did you want 2.5 gigabit? Because not all 2.5 gigabit adapter. So I actually went to a 10 gig and a 10 gig between switches. And I, just completely skipped over the
mhm,
2.5 because they're not all super, like not all of those SFP adapters that say 10 gig can also do 2.5. I'm just like, I
yeah,
didn't realize it was such a nuanced little thing.
yeah.
And
Matching the hardware is tricky.
it is. And just beating my head, I just wanted to edit faster.
Yeah, one of the biggest like support things that we'll run into is where folks will get like a 1 gig SFP mod to be able to connect, or they have a 10 gig SFP cage, and they're connecting it to a 1 gig SFP on their switch, where there's just a broken line, whether it's the switch, the module, that's not, to that 10 gig standard, and completing that handshake.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Let me take a brief pause from the questions here so that I can remind people that, let's see, where's the design? Here we go. That you can enter to win. Oh, I covered myself up. You can enter to win the BirdDog 1 year BirdDog Connect subscription by entering bit.ly BD entry. I see you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entries already, but hey, there's a lot more people watching the show, so I wanted to make sure I put this back up for people who may have missed it at the beginning. Oh, I can come down here. You come over to bit.ly/BD entry for BirdDog entry, or if you're watching this on a computer, take your phone and point it at that QR code. It will take you to the exact same URL, the exact same entry form. And on the entry form, you put in your name, your email address, and then you put in your email address a second time in case there was a typo. Gives us a second chance to get it right. Answer a couple questions about what your favorite BirdDog product is, what you want us to make, and things like that. And then hit enter. And it will show up on my end. It will just appear right in front of me. And then at the end of today's show, like right now in a few minutes, we are going to pick the winner for a 1 year BirdDog Connect subscription. And this is available around the world, so don't think it doesn't apply to you. It does apply to you. And the really cool thing is BirdDog Connect, if you don't know about it, go see last week's live show where Dan did a very nice walkthrough of the very large overview of the different big components of this really powerful tool. And it really gives you insight into it. And it's a very deep tool. And this is not a 15-day, it's not a 30-day trial or something like that. This is a whole year. So it gives you a lot of time to really dig in, start playing with things, learn about it. And then as your needs and your familiarity grows, you can start even digging deeper into this thing. So this 1 year, it's like I've had, I've gotten like subscriptions to like different things. You got a 30-day subscription and stuff happens. And I don't even like open the email for the 15 days, and then I'm like kind of like, oh no, I got to quickly, try and do this thing. 1 year. 1 year is really cool. So another entry just came in. So people are definitely taking advantage of entering to win this for free. So I just want to throw that in while we continue with the questions. So let me take that off and we'll go back to the questions. Can we do? All right. The flexes are end of life? What?
Yeah, we announced that they went end of life. I want to say it was... Here, I can actually pull it up and give you a more exact date, I think. Because we announced it earlier this spring, and we announced it to our distributors. And we've also posted it on our website. So, the letter on our website is dated June 6th. So just about a month ago.
Not even a month ago, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is pretty recent.
So that includes, the flex in, the flex out, the flex backpack, and then the wall plate in and the wall plate out.
Oh, okay. So the wall plates are part of the flex family. Okay.
Yes.
And
they're built on the same. It's the same chipset essentially. That's become difficult to source moving forward. So that's essentially, what led to this.
And I believe that the chip problem was also the same reason. I think the first studio, it was end of life as well. Is that
supply chains changes? Yeah.
Yeah, you can't keep making products based on a chipset when the people who make the chips aren't making the chips anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, that is a quite big challenge. All right, let's continue along. Is the keyboard's Ethernet port gigabit or 10100?
The KBD is a 10100 Ethernet port. It is not gigabit.
Okay, and that's probably because it's not going to be bringing in the full bandwidth version of the 4K 60.
No,
coming.
so even when it's handling, the four, video previews on the display, it's pulling in a proxy feed of that NDIHX stream. So it's a very small amount of data that it's handling, from a video perspective. So there's not really a scenario that came in place for it to need that gigabit, data.
Right, right. And for those who don't know, who might not already know, NDI is both the main video feed, and then there's this teeny little proxy view that is just, it's like a low res 320 pixel version of
Yeah,
this. And and certain software applications like vmix, you can say, choose the low bandwidth, or in studio monitor you can say choose the low bandwidth, so that all these people who are watching, they aren't pulling the big feed down, they're pulling this teeny little preview. You can still see it, still see every frame, and the same color, but it's super low bandwidth. And you can get 4 of those easily in a 10100.
yep, absolutely.
Sounds like the great Peppa Pig classic answer. It'll take as long as it takes. And yes, certain things do.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Will there be a replacement for the Flex? I'll be sad to see the Flex go. And is everybody to step up? I personally I have a couple Flexes, and I really liked the Halo tally, which kind
Yeah,
of predates the Halo tally on the new cameras. That's all around the
absolutely.
lens, and that's one of the things. It's like, just put this thing up, and you can see it from the back and the side and the side and this side. And that was just a really cool feature, I always felt.
Yeah, so we're not, done necessarily with converters, but there's definitely things that we're looking at and doing in the background. But like as I said earlier, it's the worst answer ever. But we'll announce it when it's ready. We're not going to tell you that something does or does not exist before it does. But we won't just have these four 4K Pro converters forever.
Right, right. And there's one more converter that we actually didn't talk about yet, and that is the SDM.
The SDM is pretty cool. It's a little undersung, but there's some really really cool like workflows that you can do actually. Definitely, especially in like BYO scenarios where you could have like an SDM display, like an NEC monitor, and you can slot in, the SDM, and then you can actually have somebody bring up their laptop, be able to connect, their laptop to it, encode onto the SDM, and then you can actually have them display out of the NEC what's on the laptop. But also you can send that encoded stream from the laptop anywhere else that you would want to send a NDI feed of it.
And this type of thing is really good for conference rooms. If people
Yes.
need to stream. So I got one. It's like, normally, in the past I used a NewTek Spark, which has NDI pass or HDMI pass through, which the Flexes don't have. That's the only thing that ever like, hey, I love the Flex, so I would just love to throw it down on the stage where the presenter is and have the HDMI pass through. So whatever somebody plugged in, each presenter brings their own laptop, and then this way I get whatever they've plugged in. This thing is essentially that. So that somebody wants to like walk into a room, plug in their laptop, it's going to the screen, but then it's also going to whomever's doing the stream of what's going on in the conference room to remote viewers.
Yeah.
But then the whole Dante as well. I mean, it handles Dante as well.
It does. And to my loss, I'm not as fluent with Dante as I need to be. It's something that we're still, BirdDog becoming more, fluent with, and finding, what's the best ways for us to bring it in. And, right now, the SDM's been the first way to really do that for us, beyond like our and Dante NDI bridge. But in the hardware, SDM is really our first foray into it.
Right. And then again, just, for people who don't know, Dante is audio over the network, just like NDI is video over the network. So this one module that you can drop into certain monitors that have drop-in modules, somebody can plug in their HDMI, and not only is the video signal going to the monitor and going to NDI for the stream, but it's also being converted, that HDMI audio can go to Dante, so that the person who's mixing the room and has the lavalier mic and the wireless mics and all this stuff, they're also getting the audio from that HDMI feed. So when somebody says, and here, let me play back this video clip, and the audio goes to the monitor, that means it goes to the guy in the back of the house who's got it on their Dante board. So this one board inside the monitor is handling, just shooting all kinds of stuff in all these different directions. It's a really, really cool solution.
Yeah, it really allows it to fit in different spaces where there may already be existing IP protocols being used.
Right. And again, Dante is not everywhere. It's like it has to
Yeah.
actually be implemented into a space, and you need a board that understands Dante. But if you've got that level of hardware and you've got a compatible monitor, or a conference room is looking to say, oh, what kind of monitor should we get for this room? Getting a monitor that can take a board like this, like looking at the whole ecosystem, makes this choice really, really handy, because it does a lot of all these like little things at the same time, and it simplifies it all.
It does. And so whether it's, the video that you're sending out, whether it's a professor that's pulling up a YouTube video, or, audio via embedded HDMI, or if it's just, your 3.5 that you're sending out, it's not a single form factor for how you're sending it out to be able to convert that to Dante.
All right. We had a couple more questions. The X1 Ultra can't output 1080 P60 NDI, but it can output it out the HDMI port. Oh, it can't output NDI. So if NDI is being sent to the Ultra at 1080
it doesn't have a
P60,
60. Yeah, so it doesn't do 60 frames. So that just is the lens. So that's a part of like the hardware. So that's not something that would come with a hardware fix. So there's a little bit of magic in the background that happens to facilitate that with the HDMI out. But natively with the HDMI or with the NDI, I'm sorry, that it's just how it is with that camera, is it won't do 60 frames.
right.
That's just the hardware that's in it.
And then I think we've got one more question. Again, if you're watching the show live, feel free to throw your questions in here. That's the whole magic of being here for the live show, is that you get to actually have questions answered in real time and not by AI.
I hope not.
And what that basically means is, if we don't know, we're not going to make up an answer and daydream, or whatever. What do they call it? For when AI gives you an answer that's like completely out of left field.
So AI slop.
I've heard many different things. I just like, okay.
Yeah.
And I've even used it for research. And it's like, it's funny when, so I asked it, I wrote an article about NDI, and just for curiosity, I said, tell me about, what different types of NDI. And it gave me like this 5th type of NDI that like I've never heard of. And I've been like writing about NDI for like many years. And I was just like, no.
That's funny. Did you correct it?
I just didn't use it. It was just like initial research to make sure I was like covering all my bases or whatever. Another question comes in. Any release date yet for Dante for BirdDog hardware?
So it's
that one.
It's evolving. So it is not forgotten by any means. It is certainly something that we are considerably looking at, and with how new and how much excitement there is, around that type of integration, that's absolutely something that we're not going to, announce until we have it available.
And and Dante is another like Dan made a big point about making sure that the NDI products that are coming out from BirdDog are actually NDI certified, that they're
Yep.
certified, they're tested, and when you have one component that's NDI certified and another component that's NDI certified, then you really are sort of guaranteed that things will work, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of like off-brand stuff that says it does NDI, but it doesn't do all the other NDI. Well, this one doesn't do full NDI, and that one kind of does, but this one, and there's lots of like little nuances, because NDI is a very complex thing after a decade of evolution,
Yeah.
that the certification process really does help to deliver confidence. And Dante itself is like, you really need to make sure all the ducks are in a row before you say something is good for Dante, because Dante is also a very complex and deep standard, I think.
It is, but also like even before like bringing it to hardware, if we call back to BirdDog Connect, what's really powerful in BirdDog Connect is if you have an NDI video stream and then you have a Dante audio stream, you can actually effectively merge those in Connect and then be able to send that out as its own stream. So you can join those together in BirdDog Connect.
Nice segue. So if you haven't already entered for your chance to win a 1-year subscription to BirdDog Connect, and we're not saying 15 days, not saying 30 days, 365 days. This is a big deal. Go to bit.ly/BD entry for BirdDog entry. There's an entry form there. And if you happen to have a phone and you're watching this on a computer, point your phone at the QR code and that will take you to the same form. And you can win a 1-year BirdDog Connect subscription. And if you are interested in it, we give this away every single show. If you will want to know more about what this possibly is and how it can help you, go to last week's live show, which was all about BirdDog Connect. That's the glue in the middle between encode and decode, or decode and encode. And there's this connect that allows you to connect these disparate pieces, including, as he just said, taking a Dante audio feed and an NDI video feed and merging those two things together and sending them to a third place. So that is just one of the many things that Connect can do. So if you're interested in Connect and trying it out, seeing what it can do for you, feel free to just scan this, use the entry form, and enter to win. So I would leave that up there for a couple seconds. And I think we had another questions. Here we go. So the SDM, in what brand of monitor will it fit, or in any other equipment?
So it's not exclusively to a particular brand necessarily, but the SDM is standard for that like form factor. And so the form factor that it is an SDM L. I think L large. So if you have a monitor that is compatible with SDM L modules, the our SDM will fit. So we in our office we have a few NEC monitors that we use to be able to do like our testing and everything on, but it's not exclusive to one brand necessarily. So it's more about the size factor of the SDM and making sure that it matches and it's compatible.
So it's kind of like an OG standard, but
Yeah,
inside of monitors.
that's a great analogy.
Then another question comes in: will we get SRT on the floor? Oh, this one comes in. He missed the answer in the very beginning.
We have not forgotten about it. It is still like queued up. It's queued up behind a couple of other things that we're working on the 4K boxes, but it is not something that we have forgotten about. But I don't have a timeline to be able to share for when we'll bring it.
All right. Hakan says, I would love to see more mounting options for the encoders, like a 15mm rail or a quarter. I guess that's a quarter 20 thread, because yeah, I've seen the encoders
100%.
I
We
see
have
the
gotten
notice.
that feedback and we have heard that feedback.
And that's something I wonder here. I'm going to move this out of the way so I can talk.
So you can have a face, yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm back. Um, the hardware that these encoders, and let me skip back to the other ones like the quad and everything. I mean, yes, the case is metal. So
Yep.
is that a machine case or is that a stamp case or this is a curiosity on my part.
I think it's machined. Um, I'm not going to speak in absolutes, but if I remember correctly, it's machined. But we do have for the quad, the SDI, and the HDMI, we actually have a rack mount option available for it, where you can mount two of the boxes into, I think it's a 1RU,
Hmm.
and be able to fit it in your rack. And then you're able to see the OLED display for each on the front of the mount as well. So you can
And
see it, and then
yeah,
all the wires run out of the back and everything. So it's much cleaner. So if you have more of a permanent install with these, it gives you a better way to be able to put them
and,
in a cleaner way.
and is there cooling? Because I know these things, are designed to be able to be exposed to the air. The case is the heatsink.
Yeah, so they have so these boxes actually have fans on them. So there's little slots, not in the BirdDog, but on the other side of the dog. There's a couple little slits, and then there's a little fan that blows out.
All right. So let me see. I think there was one more question as part of the presentation. Let me go past the SDM. And then I'll go to about an SFP module for my quad, but can't get it to show up on my network even after I select 10 gig NIC on the network settings. Any ideas?
Actually, it's a really good question. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but the biggest thing it comes down to is making sure that it's an SFP plus module. That's step number one. And then using a 1 gig SFP module is going to give you a bad time because it's not compatible. We need to make sure that that module is a 10 gig SFP module. And then also making sure that the SFP port on your switch that you're connecting into is also 10 gig. So like, for example, I have a half dozen Netgear M4250s that each have two SFP ports on them, but they're just 1 gig SFP. So like I know, for instance, like if you have a Netgear switch and the model number ends in an X, that indicates it's a 10 gig SFP. But I'd always recommend look at your own hardware, double check what the specifications are to make sure that the hardware that you have matches the functionality that we're looking to have.
Right, right. And there's a lot of variability too in SFP modules themselves, as we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
When I was adding fiber to my studio between my editor and the NAS, it was a lot of reading on my part to figure out like, okay, I need a specific SFP module for these switches, and then these switches, like prefer this, and then and then I want to make sure I got the same modules on both end, not different modules that might not be communicating it the right. Thankfully, it all worked the first time,
Yeah.
which is rare. But it was like it was not just like, yeah, give me that and that and that. Sure, it was a bit of reading and learning. We got another question about cameras come in.
Good.
I love the X4 and 5 cameras, but I'd also love to hear of outdoor sports versions on the drawing board, not for big rain, but a bit of drizzle. And I know BirdDog did have a real waterproof, camera before, and I think now with
Yeah.
these new cameras that are coming out, people are really looking forward to like a new model of that camera that is, I guess he says not a big rain, not a fully weatherproof, but one that is at least weather resistant.
There's some really, really cool stuff coming down the line.
Cannot say more.
We agree that like there's there's a gap that we have right now, with an outdoor camera, and it's something that we're really excited about.
Okay, so I think that's enough said there. And
But also, like, if you have like an X4 and X5, there are some really cool companies that do things to be able to adapt the cameras to different weather conditions. So there's companies like DotWorks that make, weather resistant, coverings, or even heated and cooled um, cases that they actually have the measurements for our cameras to be able to have a case that fits the camera properly, so it's protected from the elements.
right, right. And that is also a key thing, that even if the camera itself is not, let me switch over here because I'm taller. Even if the camera itself is not weather resistant, putting it in the dome, and putting it in a dome that is designed to handle the heat, provide the ventilation and things like that. And also sometimes, I find people, with other cameras, like, a small tail air that is a tiny little camera, and they just want to shoot something very simple. They'll fly it upside down, but put a big shield over it, and it's not changing the camera at all, but it's providing a little bit of protection also for the sun, because the sun can make these things heat up a whole lot. So
Yeah,
they
it
fly it
does.
up, they fly it upside down with this little shield. So it still has air ventilation, but it's not really protected. Like if it was a real big downpour, the driving rain from the side, that's not what that's for. But it provides some protection. And also, in terms of like outdoors in the summer, which it is in the northern hemisphere right now, not down in Australia. And so protecting these things from the blazing sun and the heat is a key thing, because when a camera overheats, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be a bad time. Heat, heat, not good when too much.
Heat not good, and nor rain. Last chance for anyone who wants to enter to win the BirdDog Connect subscription. I'm going to leave this up here for a couple more seconds. And last chance for your questions, your live questions, to be answered during the show, because we've gone through everything we needed to cover. And if there's anything else somebody wants to cover, because it's a live show, this is the opportunity you have to, because you tuned in live, this is your opportunity to have your question answered in near real time, as opposed to all operators are currently busy assisting other customers. So, hey, thank you very much for joining me on today's show, Christian. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
absolutely.
And I think this actually completes our Encode, Connect, and Decode series. But there's a whole lot more to cover. There's a whole lot more
Yeah.
capability. And I, after seeing just a little bit about what Connect can do, I begged Dan that we need an even more in-depth look at what Connect can do. Because once you started showing me that you could actually like build scenes and live switch in the middle of Connect,
Yep.
I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought this was just Connect.
No.
That's like doing things in the middle.
You can build streams, you can stream out, you can make a multi-view, you can do, live, over the shoulder editing with, cam to cam. It's a really powerful tool that, fits in almost every type of workflow.
It's a really amazing and deep tool. Hey, Pro Bowls TV happened to mention that they already won last week's show. Great for that. So we've got a winner coming back to win again. We shall see. Actually, let me click over here and see if did you enter to win? Okay, maybe he didn't. Well, I do have 11 entries, so I am going to say thank you again to Christian.
Absolutely.
I'm going to let you go. And to all of you who have tuned in, thank you all for being here during these live shows. You really help make them fun and interesting. And also, we really enjoy the questions. So thank you for the detailed questions, even the hard ones, because those really indicate customers who like these products, who use these products, and want more. And that is really what BirdDog really aims to, as we said, there's cool things on the way, but we're not going to announce them until they're ready to be in your hands. So, because, there have been problems in the past, but we won't get into those. So last chance, this is me stalling basically to let those people do those last few entries. And like every week, what I do is I actually show you the names, I copy the names, I put them into the wheel of names, and then I spin the wheel of names in front of you so that you can see nothing is pre-sorted, nothing is like arranged or anything like that. And, you know, I'm sure there are ways to fake it, but why? So what I'm going to do is I will take this off the screen. I will come down here to my screen share. Boom, 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 boom. There it is. That is the wheel of names from Ali down to Vladimir. I'm going to select these names. I'm going to copy these names. I'm going to go over to the wheel of names. Yes, it's a different color because I'm on a different computer today. And for some odd reason, my camera keeps, every time I click away from this thing, it changes the exposure. There. I don't know why it keeps doing that. But okay, go back to here. I'm going to paste the names in. There we go. And I'm going to click spin. And the winner is going to be Vladimir. The last person to enter is the winner. Congratulations, Vladimir. We have your information through the entry form, and you will be getting a one-year subscription to BirdDog Connect. So very, very cool. Thank you for entering, and congratulations on the win. And as always, now my key is all wrong. It's going to be one of those days. I'm in a new studio, just putting it together. Going to look a whole lot better next week. But thank you all for being here for the BirdDog Connect. And as always, we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.